All right, it is 2:31 by my watch, so I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. Thank you all so much for coming today. My name's Johanna Newman. I'm the Senior Director of the Campaign for 100% Renewable Energy at Environment America. Environment America is a national network of 30 state environmental groups. Our staff work together for clean air, clean water, clean energy, wildlife, open spaces, and a livable climate. And our members all across the United States put grassroots support behind our research and our advocacy work. I am delighted to moderate today's Renewables on the Rise briefing for state lawmakers. And joining me today are Doug O'Malley, the State Director for Environment New Jersey, Laura Dehan, the State Director for Environment California, Luke Metzger, the Executive Director of Environment Texas, and Tony Dutzik, the Associate Director and Senior Policy Analyst from Frontier Group. And helping us with back-end technical support is Lydia Churchill, the Clean Energy Associate for Environment Massachusetts. We have had a lot of interest in today's legislative briefing on how we can keep renewable energy rising across the United States. Lawmakers from 18 different states have RSVP'd for today's events, from all the coasts, all the way from Texas up to Minnesota. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we are recording today's webinar up until the Q&A section, and then we'll stop recording during the Q&A. We will also be emailing out a link to the recording to everyone who's RSVP'd, as well as links to the resources that we'll be sharing at the back end of today's briefing. So for today's event, our plan is that I will start with some context and opening remarks. Then we'll hear from our state leaders on clean energy policies that are gaining traction and that we encourage state lawmakers to turn to for ideas and inspiration to keep renewable energy growing. We'll also walk through some resources, including the newly updated Renewables on the Rise dashboard, which Tony Dutzik will walk us through. And then we'll share an additional resource that is still a work in progress. It's a working document where we include policy ideas and other resources that you all can turn to as you're thinking about your legislative priorities, looking ahead to the next legislative session. And after that, we'll do Q&A. So to ask a question, we ask that you use the Q&A function available to you in the Zoom platform. All right, so that's our agenda. Before we get to our panel of state advocates, I want to convey two core things. And I think these core takeaways are best told in images. So the first core idea is that America has renewable energy potential in spades. This graphic that you see on the screen in front of you is from a report that Environment America Research and Policy Center and Frontier Group worked on a few years ago called We Have the Power. And in the lower right-hand side, you will see a small white circle outlined in red that visually represents how much electricity the United States used in 2020. And all the other colorful circles represent the technical potential of America's renewable energy sources. So from this slide, you can see that offshore wind alone could meet our electricity needs. Onshore wind, many times over, could power our country. Utility scale photovoltaic is our most abundant renewable energy source. And even just by maximizing rooftop solar, we could get a lot of the electricity that we need in America. And so it is not a lack of renewable energy potential that keeps us from powering our country with entirely by clean renewable sources that never run out. We have renewable energy potential in spades. So that's the first key point that I wanted to convey. And I want to add an addendum, which is that this idea that we can power our country with renewable energy holds true for almost every single state under a scenario where by 2050 we electrify all of our buildings and all of our transportation as well. So that's the first takeaway. We have a lot of renewable energy potential in the United States. The second key point that I want to make is that together we can keep clean energy adoption growing in the United States by pursuing a strategy that relies on fueling a virtuous cycle to grow clean energy. And so I want to just briefly explain the different stages of this virtuous cycle strategy. Often, this cycle is initiated by goal setting, which you see in the navy blue part of the circle. And goals are a really powerful tool that can help kickstart a collective endeavor. Structured right, those goals lead to action. And that action, when it comes to clean energy, has by and large been met with success. Often, when we set clean energy goals, we meet them ahead of time and on schedule, and sometimes we even surpass them. I can think of numerous occasions in the United States where leaders have set, quote, aspirational goals, only to then actually hit those goals years ahead of schedule. So action is then met with success. And then we work as part of our strategy to leverage that success into confidence to do even more. And that confidence then drives ambition for the next wave of goal setting. This is a strategy that has been fueling clean energy growth across America for the better part of the past 2 decades. And the collective impact of this strategy is tremendous. America now gets more than 3 times as much power from the wind, the sun, and the earth as we did just 10 years ago. And so now I'd like to just walk quickly through how each of the key clean energy technologies has grown over the course of the past decade. And I'll run through this relatively quickly. But let me start with wind power. America gets more power from the wind than we do from any other renewable energy source today. We produced enough wind power to power 41 million typical homes last year. That's 2.6 times as much power as we got from wind energy just a decade ago. The next technology that I'll cover is solar power. So America produced enough solar energy to power 19 million homes in 2022, which is nearly 12 times as much as we produced from solar just a decade ago. Battery storage is a technology that we'll need if we want to rely on renewable sources around the clock. And battery storage in America is on the rise. America now has 8.9 gigawatts of battery storage installed, which is 60 times as much battery energy storage as we had a decade ago. Likewise, energy efficiency, which in many ways should be our first fuel, is continuing to grow. The energy efficiency improvements that we installed in 2021 will save our nation 300 terawatt hours of power over their lifetime. That's enough electricity to power 28 million homes for a year. And then there are 2 more technologies that I want to highlight that are key to America's clean energy transition. The first is electric vehicles. So Americans bought 925,000 plug-in EVs in 2022. That's a more than 10-fold increase over the past decade. And I just read a couple of weeks ago that we've hit the million mark in 2023. So that's really exciting. You need places to charge all those electric vehicles. And what's exciting is that the number of electric vehicle chargers in America is also on the rise. We now have more than 151,000 EV charging stations installed nationwide, which is a nearly 18-fold increase from 2013. So that's all really encouraging. Renewables are growing faster than most people projected. But to avoid the worst impacts of climate change and the environmental and public health impacts that come with that, we need to pick up the pace. And the states is where most of that action is going to happen over the course of the next couple of years. So we're going to walk through some of the state policies that can continue to spur clean energy growth. But rather than hearing from me, I'm excited to now turn things over to our state level advocates. And we're going to start with Doug O'Malley, the State Director of Environment, New Jersey. Doug, take it away.
Super. Thank you so much, Johanna. And just a big kudos to the Frontier Group staff that helped to produce Renewables on the Rise and all of my state colleagues. But really, just a huge thank you to everyone on this webinar, state legislators, state legislative staff. You're obviously doing the heavy lifting on the future of clean energy in America. And this is a great resource. Renewables on the Rise is a great resource. And I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the importance of setting goals for renewables. And Johanna was hitting on this, right? There's ambition, but you have to put ambition into work. I always like to reference a saying from our former governor, Jim McGreevey, who got it from his dad, who was in the Army: plan your work and work your plan. And this is, I think, just a critical lesson that we have learned in New Jersey, that if we set goals for renewables, it allows us to have accountability, both from, as our DEP calls the advocacy community, accountability partners, but also for state decision makers to kind of know, here's the barometer, here's where we're going, and have goals for our various state public utility commissions, and then obviously administrations to be moving forward. And I think this is critical because, right now there's kind of two dichotomies, right? There's the doomers that say we're at a climate apocalypse, and there's deniers. And the reality is, whether you're in New Jersey or Oklahoma, the potential for clean energy is so strong. In New Jersey, we started this work more than 20 years ago. In 2001, we had 6 solar installations. We now generate more than 4 million gigawatts from solar energy alone. And that's because going back to 1999, working with our Republican governor, Republican legislature, we had set asides for clean energy, and then ultimately a clean energy portfolio standard that was very modest in the early 2000s. But those aspirational goals, which initially started off with 2020 goals and now have evolved to 2030 and 2050, that set us on the path for where we are right now. 5 years ago, the New Jersey legislature under Governor Murphy passed our Clean Energy Act that set a standard for 50% renewable energy by 2030, as well as 100% clean energy by 2050. We are working obviously towards those goals right now, but that legislation ended up being really the lighter fluid for the clean energy revolution we've seen in the state over the last few years. And that obviously was led by legislators. We now are at a different moment over the course of the last 2 years. Some of our champion legislators have been working on legislation for 100% clean energy by 2035. Governor Murphy came out with an executive order in February, which is great, but as we all know, we need the force of law behind it. And so the effort to be able to increase our renewable energy goals is really a sign of how things have accelerated, and also the accelerant of the Inflation Reduction Act, which Johanna mentioned. That is obviously really, really critical for making the clean energy investment happen, but we need those state laws in place. And I also just want to emphasize here, I always remember talking with mayors early in my career, and them telling me specifically, there's no Republican pothole, there's no Democratic pothole, there's just a pothole. And the same holds true for natural disasters. We are still reeling from Hurricane Sandy more than a decade ago. There's communities that have been permanently changed, and people that are still out of their homes a decade later. We are also 2 years after Hurricane Ida. We are still learning from the fact that just because a flood was really bad 30 years ago, that is not the high water mark. So there's an increasingly awareness that to deal with the natural disasters that we faced, we need to be able to have these aggressive goals and to meet them. And I just wanted to, reference, not to toot our own horn, but we've seen clean energy expand double over the course of the last decade. 15 times the number of electric vehicles are on our road, 9 times the amount of battery storage. But the big thing we're really waiting for to kind of make that double into a quadruple, and even bigger than that, is offshore wind. And the promise of offshore wind is tremendous. We like to say the Jersey wind has a lot of things, but there's a gold mine of clean energy right off the Jersey Shore. And this is true up and down the Atlantic coast. It's also true out west on the Pacific coast. The Biden administration has a goal of 30 gigawatts. In New Jersey, our goal by 2040 is 11 gigawatts. And there's obviously a lot of, if you've been paying attention to the news, the offshore wind industry has had a choppy year. But there's construction that's moving forward with Vineyard Wind in Massachusetts. Next year, we'll see Ørsted move forward on the Ocean Wind project, which will have roughly 100 turbines off Atlantic City. That will power 500,000 homes in New Jersey and create obviously the incentives and the supply chain to be able to build much more than that. So we're at the cusp of being able to build something that's really transformational for our, not only our clean energy economy, not just for New Jersey, but our entire regional electric grid, which goes all the way down to North Carolina, all the way out to Illinois. And this is a reminder where our grid is changing, and we need to accelerate that change because of the problems that we're facing from climate change. So this is just finally a kind of a reminder. Check in with me in a couple months, and I'll let you know how we did at the end of our legislative session on that clean energy bill. But the importance of setting goals, planning your work, and you working your plan on clean energy is paramount. Johanna, back to you.
Doug, thanks so much. All right, we're gonna go from New Jersey across the country to California, where Laura Dean, the State Director of Environment California, will talk a little bit about some of the solar policies that have gained traction in the Golden State, as well as some of the offshore wind developments there. Thanks so much, Laura.
Thank you, Johanna. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to hear more about how renewables are on the rise and some of the policies that have helped make that possible. I live out in sunny California, where we're really proud that we are the nation's leader when it comes to catching that solar power, that sunshine, and using it to power our lives. And it's not accidental that that's the case. It's really the result of the work of legislators and their staff and all of the support from the public here that have allowed us to put in place really strong policies to encourage solar growth. That's why we've got 1.5 million solar roofs across the state now, and why we're the biggest solar state as well when you look at overall solar production. But as we saw from that little diagram at the start, we're only barely scratching the surface of the potential. And this past year, we were trying to figure out what else can we do in California to encourage more renewable growth, more solar growth in particular, so we can catch more of that sunshine. And our Go Solar campaign, we've been really looking at all that different potential. One of the areas that we thought about is California highways. California, you know, we're we have a very car-centric culture, right? And there, as a result, are a lot of highways in our state. We actually have 75,000 highway miles crisscrossing California. And every time you get on and off the highway, there are these like exit spaces, and all of that is publicly owned land. It's the part of the state's rights of way. And we came across a great article about an organization out of Georgia, the RAY, that had really spearheaded making use of that space along the sides of highway to put solar panels and storage and transmission even to be able to get more clean energy. And in fact, 25 states have already been taking action to take advantage of that. But we learned that California doesn't have any solar along our highways yet, even though we've got all of this highway space. And other states had done more, like in Maine and in Iowa. They'd really looked at this potential. And we thought, what could we do to take advantage of all of this space? And we teamed up with Senator Becker from the state of California, from San Mateo area. And we put together a bill that just got signed into law that will open up California highways for the first time for leases to be able to put solar storage and transmission. And the other key part of the bill is it's going to require the state transportation agency to look at the potential and figure out how much clean energy potential land there is, that could be developed. So we're really excited. We're really hopeful that this is going to open up this brand new potential energy. We actually did a report earlier this year, and we found that just in 3 counties in California, Ventura, in LA, and San Diego combined, there was enough land along the sides of the highway that if we used it for solar, we could we could actually power 270,000 homes, and that's only 3 counties. So we've got a lot more highway space that we could be taking advantage of, and we're really eager to see that potential. One of the advantages of solar along highways is that it can be built really quickly. It doesn't have any of the land conflicts that can sometimes slow down renewable energy development. And it can also save the state money, because instead of having to spend money to maintain the sides of the highway, like mowing the lawns or preventing there being overgrowth into the highway space, the land gets leased to solar developers who then are responsible for maintaining it. And so they're paying the state money for that, right? And and producing clean energy that can help us build that cleaner, more resilient energy grid. So lots of great advantages to solar along highways. And this is only, again, one piece of the solution. We have a lot more space in California that we've already developed, from the growing number of warehouses along the state to farmland that is now having to go fallow. And so there's even more potential for us to be able to go solar across the state of California than we're currently using. And we're really eager to do more to take advantage of those solutions this next year. And then I also wanted to talk about offshore wind, which, just as Doug said, off the East Coast and the Atlantic, there's huge offshore wind potential. That's also true off of the West Coast. The Pacific Coast is so windy, especially when you get like 20 to 30 miles offshore. The wind blows really hard, really fast. And we wanted to make sure that California was taking advantage of that. We don't have any offshore wind off the California coast or off the West Coast yet, but the potential is massive. And so Environment California teamed up with another lawmaker. It was Assemblymember David Chu at the time, a couple of years ago, to really work to make sure that we jump-started California's offshore wind industry. And we wanted to do that by charging the state agencies to work together. So the Energy Commission with the Coastal Commission and the State Lands Commission, to figure out what are all the challenges in doing offshore wind and what's all the potential. And then through that effort to set a goal, a target that would be a planning target for the state to use, and then put in place the plan to actually get there. And we're really excited that bill passed into law a couple of years ago. And as a result, last year, California set a goal of generating 25 gigawatts of power by 2045 from offshore wind alone, which is enough to power 25 million homes in our state. And it's particularly great because when the sun sets, we can still rely on the wind that blows harder than ever off of the coastline. And so it can be a really nice complement to solar power. And so now the state, even though we have that target, of course, setting the goal is the first step in doing the work. Now we have to do that work, work toward our plan. And so the state, the legislature, and we're working with partners in the legislature now to make sure that we put in place all the different stepping stones to actually get to that really ambitious goal. And so that includes making sure that we're evaluating port needs. We're going to need to upgrade our ports. Making sure that the workforce piece is available, that the supply chain is available, because we don't have the giant turbines getting built in California yet. So we're going to need to make sure we have those in place. And also the resources that's going to take, upgrading ports, etc. So we're really thrilled. This past session, Environment California worked with Assemblymember Zabur from the Santa Monica area, and also with other lawmakers like Eddie Garcia, the Assembly member from the Coachella Valley area in California, to get in place really important clean energy laws that are going to help us actually get to those goals, including the port planning and upgrades and workforce piece, as well as making sure that the state has the ability to do central procurement, so to actually order up or buy some of that clean energy, so that we can provide that assurance to the industry that there's going to be someone to buy the offshore wind energy once it gets once it gets coming in, once we get those electrons coming in, some of these longer lead time energy sources are harder for investors to, take the risk, because it takes so much longer to actually build them. And so it's really important that the state has that power, that they just got, a couple of weeks ago when the governor signed AB 1373 into law. So happy to share any of the resources about some of those important Go Solar and offshore wind bills. And over to you, Johanna.
Thanks, Laura. All right. In our virtual journey around the country, we're next going to go down to the Gulf Coast, where Luke Metzger, who's the Executive Director of Environment Texas, will talk a little bit about some of his work defending renewable energy against attacks in the legislature.
Great. Thanks, Johanna. So Texas in 1999 passed one of the nation's first renewable energy mandates under then Governor George W. Bush. And the law was so successful that just 6 years later, under Rick Perry, the legislature doubled the mandate. And at the same time as setting those goals, they also approved an investment in new transmission lines, from our cities out to the windiest and sunniest parts of the state in order to bring that power back. And the combination of those policy choices really ignited a boom for clean energy in Texas. And so today we're number one for wind power, number two for solar power behind California. We're also making great strides on battery storage, electric vehicles, and other things. And so last year, renewable energy provided over 31% of the electricity for the state. And thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act and the continuation of tax credits, we are expecting even more rapid growth for clean energy. The project queue for new power projects is stacked with huge amounts of wind, solar, battery storage. And at the same time, though, this success has attracted a backlash, and we're now working to defend our progress here in Texas, particularly after Winter Storm Uri. Unfortunately, some politicians falsely blamed wind power for the blackouts that Texas had, when in fact, the evidence is clear that the main problem were actually failures on the natural gas supply. Both everything from the wellhead to the power plants froze up. But unfortunately, the damage was done. And there, in the last two legislative sessions, we've seen efforts to curtail this growth by setting new fees, new restrictions, even outright bans on renewable energy in Texas. And thankfully, thus far, we've fended off these attacks on our clean energy progress. And we're working to, at this point, given the expected growth in clean energy, we're telling legislators, to please do no harm. Just you should lead, follow, or get out of the way, and don't mess with Texas's clean energy success. And so that's our main policy push at the Texas legislature, is to kind of fend off some of these attacks. However, we know there's many more things that we could do. For example, boosting utility energy efficiency programs. There's a bill that passed the Texas Senate this spring that would have done that. Unfortunately, didn't move through the House. We do need to continue those investments in transmission, and do more to promote rooftop solar and home battery storage. We're doing a really great job on the utility scale side, but could be doing far more to invest in this distributed energy resources as well. So I'll wrap up there and turn it back to Johanna.
Thanks so much, Luke. So we've talked about wind, we've talked about solar. I want to talk briefly about energy efficiency, and then I'll turn it over to Tony to talk about resources that you all can use as you work to grow renewable energy in your state. So when it comes to energy efficiency, far and away, the cleanest energy that we use is the energy we never use in the first place. And using the energy that we do create more wisely is going to be the fastest and the cheapest way to meet our energy needs. There are a number of approaches you can take to improve energy efficiency. Two that Environment America is prioritizing right now include clean lighting policy, which phases out inefficient and mercury-containing light bulbs from the marketplace. To date, 7 states have enacted legislation to remove fluorescent bulbs from the market, and we encourage other states to follow those states' lead. Secondly, appliance standards are a proven, tried and true way to reduce energy costs for consumers, spur improvements in technology, and reduce overall demand on our electric system. And we have for decades partnered with the Appliance Standards Awareness Project to advance appliance efficiency at the state and the national level. And so for anyone interested in that policy, happy to share resources there. There is more in the realm of energy efficiency, including just spurring the switch to more efficient electric technology by driving the adoption of heat pump water heaters and heat pump space heaters, which are incentivized in the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as energy efficiency programs that utility programs run, or that utility companies run. But I will leave it at that for now. And hand it over to Tony to share the Renewables on the Rise dashboard, which is a new resource, a newly updated resource that we've been creating for a number of years to help document the growth of renewable energy in America. Tony, go ahead.
Hey, hi, everybody. Thank you, Johanna. Again, my name is Tony Dutzik. I'm the Associate Director and Senior Policy Analyst at Frontier Group. We are a research and public policy organization whose mission is to provide information and ideas to build a cleaner, more sustainable America. And we have partnered with Environment America on the production of this Renewables on the Rise dashboard, which I'm going to take you on a quick guided tour of now. Lydia, would you mind pulling up the slide? Okay, great. So the Renewables on the Rise dashboard is a useful resource for you to learn about and communicate the progress of clean energy in your state. This is the 7th iteration of this project. The last couple of them is interactive online resources. And we can go ahead and roll the video. On the dashboard, you can see a national map that shows you the total amount of wind, solar, and geothermal energy generated in 22 in your state compared to what it was a decade ago, as well as the share of electricity in your state that comes from those resources. If you scroll down, you'll see a state dashboard. This tool allows you to select a particular state and track the changes over the last decade on 6 different metrics of clean energy progress: wind and solar power, electric vehicle sales and EV charging, as well as energy efficiency savings and battery storage. And in those areas, you can see the amount of energy produced, the number of typical homes that electricity would power, the rank of your state in total, and also the rank of growth for the last decade. In addition, in each of the charts, you can actually choose other states, so maybe neighboring states or peer states that you can use to compare and contrast progress over the last decade. Not only that, but we've also summarized all of this information for each state in a downloadable 2-page fact sheet that has all of the information from the dashboard, as well as some additional information about your state's total renewable energy potential. Lastly, the site includes some summary national statistics on clean energy, as well as detailed sourcing and methodology, and some opportunities for individuals to take action to encourage further growth in renewable energy. And ultimately, we hope that this dashboard helps to convey a sense of real excitement and promise surrounding America's transition to renewable energy, as well as provide a useful and readily accessible source of information for you to share with your colleagues, constituents, and others. If you have any questions about any of the material here, we can certainly talk about it in the Q&A, or you can feel free to reach out to me or to Johanna via email. One last thing that I'll just mention is that, as I said earlier, we have produced now, we've been tracking changes in growth in renewable energy now for the last 7 years. We are going to be continuing to do that. So you can continue, we'll be updating this resource on at least an annual basis so that you'll be able to come back to this site over and over again and find the latest data about our transition to renewable energy. So thank you very much, Johanna, and thanks to all of you who came to this webinar.
Great. Thanks so much, Tony. In addition to Renewables on the Rise, there was one more resource that we wanted to make available to all of the attendees on today's webinar. And Lydia, if you wouldn't mind sharing the next 2 slides. So I will say first, if you go to this QR code, you can find the Renewables on the Rise dashboard. The link will remain the same even when we update it. So consider this an evergreen resource. Next page, please. And then also, we have worked to create from Environment America with the input of state directors and advocates in our 30 states, a resource that compiles clean energy resources for lawmakers such as yourselves to consider using as a springboard to advance clean energy growth in your state. And so and again, the QR code here will be evergreen. We consider this a living document. So as new policies and new resources emerge, we'll add them to this resource for you. But currently up there includes, for example, the Solar on Highways report that Laura was referencing in the bill that passed in California. Model legislation for electrifying fleets and school buses, as well as reports on, the benefits to the grid of having school bus fleets with electric batteries that can bring power back to the grid and vice versa. And so there are a number of model policies, toolkits, resources that you all can use that I hope will serve as springboards to accelerate the clean energy transition.